one of the things that really struck me through this process as a real challenge is we have a combination. We have two different tasks ahead. Some are more institutional oriented, which you think of when you run a college, and there are a lot of things that fall in the mission of what you're doing at your college, which this report or some of the insights or things that you've gathered from this process might have a bearing or implications on the work you're doing through your institution. So it may not be anything new, but it may be a refreshed take on what you're doing. And primarily, that's something that, however you read, I'm not trying to pick on you, it's just sort of using it as an example. But you may draw upon a broader public to inform the work you're doing, but fundamentally it's something your institution's doing. However, there's another side of this too, which is really about a transformation of an opportunity that gives us a lens into which how we can view the transformation of the region and of opportunities in people's lives for either personal fulfillment or job creation and economic development or other sort of actions that we also see as being aligned with things that we view in the entrepreneurial innovation space today in the world that this region would like very much to play a role in or part of. And the funny thing about that part of the subject is it's easy for a person to say, if I run my office or my business or my organization, well, I'm responsible and I'm going to do this work and I'll get back to you in 6 months and I'll tell you how it's going. Once you move to the other side of it and say, well, gosh, actually what we're really trying to do is we're trying to figure out how we catch lightning in a bottle and then disperse it and magnify, and then more importantly than that, it's not something that's mine. It's not something that's yours. It's something that for the region, for it to really work, it's something people have to be inspired to see themselves in their own role in it. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because if you take that view that this is really about some of the fundamentals and some of the basics, some of the opportunities we might see out there that we can tell our story or market better to, but also about engendering a climate in which people feel both inspired and enabled to do things in their lives that are catalytic and very positive for the region based off this event, then you can't possibly say, and I know Tim doesn't mean this, but you can't possibly say, 7 people are going to get in a room together and work on this. Or even you have 8 committees and the committees meet and they get together every month and then see what happens. This is really a much more creative exercise than that. And I think one of the challenges that I've talked about regularly that I don't have a solution for, by the way, so if you do, I'd love to hear it, is how to both operationalize something in ways in which particular organizations or entities are effective and accountable for what they're doing here in their wheelhouse, but at the same time we're able to broaden the conversation so that somebody who's out there doing something can feel inspired to feel that they're a part of this. And I'll give you 2 examples that are very tangible to this. The first one is last week at a DML, that was very much a Holyoke event. I mean, it brought in people from all over the place, but it was very much about Holyoke. And yet, I met there people who are in the Middle and Upper Valley, who are interested in entrepreneurship and thinking about ways of doing these kinds of things in Franklin County and Amherst and Hampton more than they're currently doing. And they were so jazzed up that they thought, gosh, I didn't even know all these cool people around here. I need to figure out how I can participate. How do I do something that I can feel can touch other people, that can make a difference and start networking in ways that are important for entrepreneurship. Those people, in my opinion, even if they're just off there doing something on the internet or their own bliss or in coffee shops, should feel a part of this. And it shouldn't be separate. It should be something that's related to how you do innovation. On a much more practical and institutional level, I and I know Pat Larkin have been in a few conversations with Sue and Bannister from the Life Sciences Center as a follow-up to her work on a Life Sciences Summit in the Valley. So she's been talking about ways of organizing her strategic resources in a way that's strategic around catalyzing an innovation-based life sciences strategy that touches upon advanced manufacturing, touches upon entrepreneurship, touches upon the institutional resources in the Valley. And so we haven't done it yet, but we're going to sit down and think about how we can help her think about that. Again, that's not something that you have sitting out there as some sort of, well, we're doing our thing, and now Sue is just going to go off there and she's going to do her thing. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It's an innovation strategy, and it's based on the same sort of assets and issues we have here. I think, by the way, Tim, I've exhausted my time for the rest of the meeting. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you have a comment?
Yeah, I want to make sure, and I appreciate
the context that you provide, Eric, for this discussion. I want to make sure we don't lose the thread that Bill has introduced, which really, I think, boils down to the status of the Innovation District's task force and its relationship to the work going forward. What I like about what Bill has suggested is if he really sees the family, the stakeholders, as folks that have invested in the strategy and want to ensure its success. And Tim, you talked about what I would call the rudder team, task forces, working with implementation, needs to embed a principle where it brings back its progress. And so I don't know that we need to maintain a formal task force on an ongoing basis. I think that's the question we all have to ask and answer ourselves. But I do think that members of the task force have embedded themselves in this process and feel a part of it. I think that we need to be true to that and come back with that report and build in a structured way communications and progress back to you so that you know, so we have an even understanding of where things stand, but more importantly, you can pick your spots. Where can you move in? Where can you enhance it here, there? And that's going to be part of the work anyhow. But to, like you said, Bill, maybe formalize an interval and make sure that close connections are going to be made is advisable.
Well, so yeah, and to some extent we have to find this blend between not calling meetings just to call meetings, but to call meetings to measure our progress against the strategies. And that's particularly challenging because, as we've heard here this morning, there's 7, 8, 15 things going on already inside many of the strategies, and we're not communicating that well. We have to communicate that better. And so somehow we have to blend this sort of nimble, organic approach that we're using. I think it's been pretty effective on a number of levels. I would just, as an aside, say we've had remarkable conversations with Mike and Alan and Jim and Kathy about the issues that Eric was talking about in terms of downtown and properties in downtown. And we're just doing that. We're doing that instinctively. We're moving ahead. We're not waiting to fulfill, the implementation strategy to do that. So I think we do have a challenge to come back to you members with a plan. I know Tim had an ambition that we'd have that nailed down for today. We didn't get there. But we do have to come back with a plan. The plan has to be this blend, this sort of wonderful blend of nimble, organic, opportunistic with communicating and making sure people are understanding what we're about. I would use one more example to make the point. You mentioned urban agriculture. All along this way, Kathy and Bob and I have been working on urban agriculture and touching that in different ways. And it turns out that here in Holyoke, you have an author and an expert on urban agriculture who we recruited to the effort, Eric Tonsmeyer. And he's been, for us, he's been wonderful. And we just bumped into him through our focus groups and our outreach efforts. And he's become a trusted advisor to us in terms of trying to think about, how do you do urban agriculture here in Holyoke, and how do you relate that to CISA and PB Grows and all the efforts going on with farmers up and down the valley. We've also recruited in Secretary Sullivan's representative, I should say Commissioner Agriculture's representative, Rick Chandler, into the effort. And he and Eric are both now advising us.
And we've done a preliminary engineering study on the feasibility of using waste but I think the point is we need to figure out how we're going to structure that moving forward so that all the energy that's put on this table remains invested and tied into the work. So Bill, the principles of what you've said is the way in which we will manage our work going forward. The real question on the table is how formal or informal we want to hold the task force. Up to this point, we have not elected to have a parallel effort, not to keep the task force going and then set up this new apparatus. I think that this new apparatus would be true to the origination of the plan and consider everyone a stakeholder, We would have intervals where we could convene folks and bring them in. But more often, everyone's going to be engaged in a lot of this work anyhow, and it's going to be fun.
Colleen, Diane, and then Bob.
I agree with not having meetings just for the sake of meetings, but being a person that is here representing the political aspect that's behind all of this, I would just like to request that the communication be kept up. An example of which is that our office, and I'm sure that the other offices also, get a lot of questions about what's going on. And I know that Senator Knappich has found himself a couple of times I'm here, I've got all the minutes, he reads them all, but he has found himself at different times where questions have come to him from the general constituency that we can't answer. Poor Eric had to leave the idea mill and come and sit down with the two local representatives on Friday because they had questions they could not answer that come up. And I just request that even if we're not asked to sit at the table, that we get the information. And not just from this group, but the information that's going on. We did not have advanced information on the idea mill. And there were questions that came through on that. So it's not a complaint or criticism, it's just help us so that we can put the best foot forward in keeping this going within the communities.
And I think as Tim said earlier, the communication plan is going to be key, and it holds us all accountable as well. So thank you for that.
We read a lot of stuff.
I know you do. Diane?
I have two questions and a comment. And the questions are, how does this fit into the plan for progress, and how does it fit into the state's economic development plan?
I'm so glad you brought that up because we have a specific game plan, and I think maybe with playing off what Eric said, I don't think we should forget there's another entire plan with a whole other set of strategies for the entire region that are in place that need to be connected. A good example is yesterday we have a marketing of the region strategy, and so we had the EDC in who's responsible for that strategy reporting on what that is, how it works. How we market in the future will be influenced by this endeavor. So the plan for the progress is to have this on the agenda for the December meeting. We just spoke to the group this week, and essentially absorb all these strategies into the plan. They become another component of the region's overall plan. And that way they connect also to the other pieces, whether it's workforce, whether it's business retention, whether it's K through 12, that are all important in terms of advancing. So our plan is to have, by the end of the year, this sort of absorbed and become a new piece of the region's overall plan.
On the state economic development strategy, I think there are two different things. In terms of the actual formal plan, which is kind of being worked through on the Economic Development Planning Council for the act of the legislature last August 2010. I think there actually is literally a reference to Holyoke in there, but in fact, it's really more about the principles that are laid out as the strategic objectives of that strategy. And those principles or priorities in the plan align very, very well with this one. So I think in that sense, it's very consistent with where the priorities of the administration are. There's another level, which is more sort of practical level, and probably the one that this group should know more about, which is in our office and in our communication with the governor's office. Where is this on the radar screen? And as far as that goes, Secretary Bielecki, under the governor, has made it very clear that making progress on both the center itself and also the elements that fall out of that, and strategically take advantage of it for the region, are a very, very high priority in our work. And it's part of, I should say, part of how we're being measured, but I'm certainly behind the measure about in terms of performance on their behalf. So it's something. It has been and will remain a high strategic objective.
My comment. The plan is terrific. There's nothing in it that shouldn't be done. To me, it's an operational strategy is in enhancing the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. I think it's who we are, it's what we have. The economic engine of this region is small business. And I don't know why, I wish everybody in this room had been at that conference last Friday. It was electric in its energy. Their theme was, in addition to being an idea mill, innovation, collaboration, and entrepreneurship. You cannot say any better what this region needs than those three words. And if you do nothing but collaborate to make the other things happen under the heading and the umbrella of entrepreneurship and small business development, I think we will put this region on the map in a way that we never have before, because we never really faced who we are and never decided how we're going to package and market and brand and identify ourselves. And if we go out there with 8 strategies, that is not branding us, it's not identifying ourselves. One strategy that we say who we are, this is who we are. So,
Bob, you have a comment.
Thank you, Kathy. First, I'd like to thank Tim and Kathy for all of the leadership they've exercised in putting this together. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, and all of us volunteer in different areas, and that asset time is money. So you guys did a really great job. A lot of information here. I don't know what's easier, to implement this plan or solve the national debt crisis. There's also opportunities. Our firm's been around for 113 years, and to the point of measurement, if we hadn't psyched out the cycles and what's happening next and put together a plan, we probably wouldn't have been around for 113 years. And it's difficult to put together a strategic plan. The difficult part, though, once you've done it, is the measurement process. And Tim, you talked about a 3-year window, short-term, I assume 1 year, and after that is long-term. And putting that together. But what we've done in our firm for the last 4 years, we create and have used a Microsoft SharePoint process where we don't have a lot of committee meetings. We'll have one strategize, who's got the R for responsibility, who's got the A for accountability. And that SharePoint site, let's say, enhancing entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. You go to the site, we all get a password, and you have your 8 strategies listed. You click on one of the strategies, and you see what's been going on. We don't need a lot of committee meetings if you're interested in what's happening. So you have a central site, we can look at it, see what's going on. You can have a summary, you give us an alert, and that's what we do. You put an alert, something's been posted, and if you want to take the time to check that alert out, oh, I see 4.3 enhancing entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem has been affected by a meeting or an action step. Yep. So you can see what's going on. Because Bill's right. I'm a real fan of measurement, action steps. You've got a plan, and apparently a plan to exercise the plan. That's good. So we don't all have to meet, but we do, because of that investment in time and energy, we have vested interest in the results of this. They're going to be action by yourself in the kitchen cabinet. So I would diplomatically suggest that that's one way you can all participate. And then if you see something, you can give an answer, you can give a comment, and everybody sees it. If you're interested, just set an alert on that site, and you get an email, something's happened, and you can go look at it. That way we're all connected, communicating with each other on a real-time basis.
That's a great idea.
Really? Yeah, that's a great idea. And the other thing I just want to go back and say, I misspoke and caught myself. I really see you folks as not stakeholders, but shareholders. And so we need to report back to you just as if we made this investment. What's our return on investment? What do we spend all this time on? Do we have anything to show for it? But that way of communicating it in sort of a virtual corporation way is, I think, superb. Thanks.
Other comments? I know one of the things that we've been doing, not only enhancing the economic development delivery system, but the site ready, which is my challenge for Holyoke, and trying to get sites ready for development. when businesses want to come here, especially in the lower 4 census tracts. And we've been meeting with the economic development partners, and that conversation is region-wide. It's not just for Holyoke. And if we want to sell this region, we all have to have sites available. So we had a great discussion at the last meeting on how do we work together as all economic development people in the region to understand how to get a shovel-ready site, how to make sites available that maybe are in back taxes. So there's a whole line of issues. And we have a number of challenges in Holyoke with empty buildings, empty lots, and from the reports that have come back from a market analysis that we have more of those than most of the communities around us. So we have quite a challenge. We met a couple days ago in the mayor's office with the president of our city council to start talking about this, and how I know one of the strategies says to get, or my strategy on the site ready is to get 3 to 5 sites into the hands of the redevelopment authority or an economic development corporation so we can turn these sites around. I talk with folks around the table, KIP included, looking for buildings that have water damage because the roof is open. How do we secure these buildings and make them weather tight so that we can, eventually turn them into some prospering businesses? So I think this whole group is helpful for me because I can't do this alone. The region can't do it alone. And you all have different expertise around the table that can help advise and help push these things forward.
Just a couple of comments. I think it's really important that we develop a communication plan that follows this meeting so that there are periodic updates. And one of the biggest problems we always have is those of us responsible for execution put our heads down and run and come up for air 3 or 4 months later and just say, well, what have you been doing? And it's important to be doing as well as communicating. So we have to figure that out. And I like some of the suggestions. I think that I'm encouraged by the enthusiasm around the kitchen cabinet by those who have accepted responsibility as leads, co-leads with each of these strategies. I'm encouraged by the amount of accountability they already feel for executing their part of the plan. And I think that's, as I observe, that's really important for me to see, because if that isn't really embedded, then time goes by, pressure of reporting back to this group diminishes, and enthusiasm diminishes. But I don't see that. I see just the opposite. I think it's really very positive. As Kathy said, we've already been doing some things based on the draft to get ready to be able to run. And the economic development partners, the enhanced economic delivery system, the development of higher education team and be more responsive to these efforts is already underway. And I think it's really enthusiastic. I think that we're going to need some encouragement too as we go, because this kind of a plan is a difficult plan. There are some pieces that are low-hanging fruit, and some are medium-range, 3-year objectives that take a long time to get some gratification around. And so, in some ways, this group needs to be a cheerleader to recognize that not everything is going to happen like that. It's going to be some really hard work. But generally, I think we've collectively got the right attitude to launch, and I'm really encouraged by it. Thanks.
So any other thoughts on strategy or implementation since we merged those agenda items? So the question is, I think that it would be appropriate to suggest that we want to, as a group, as shareholders, adopt this, commit that we're going to move and make this transition from making strategy to doing strategy, with the help, as Alan was just saying, of a lot of other folks. So that's what I would put forward as how to bring these two items to closure, at least today, and to move into this new phase.
people around each of the action items?
Yes.
Do we
Not
have
to
list?
say, though, Diana, as I keep trying to underscore, that anything is set in concrete. I think the idea is to get the core group there and bring in folks, organizations, individuals as needs and circumstances dictate to get things done. It's that fluid and being able to be nimble and adjust to needs and circumstances. But there's a core group at least there to make sure that we take the handoff and keep going.
So could we see that list later sometime, at least the action items and the identified people who are part of the execution or implementation?
Well, as I iterated before, City of Holyoke, Kathy, Holyoke Gas and Electric, Jim, EDC, Alan, with help, Bill from the REB, myself from the Planning Commission, Eric from the state, Michael from MOBD, Bill and Bob from MTC, and Richard Henderson from Mass Development, who couldn't be here today. So
And
that's
Pat
been,
Larkin.
yeah, Pat, obviously, too, has been. So that's the core group, but we've also talked about that may not be sufficient as we move forward, but that's the core. And each strategy has an opportunity lead that's
Yeah.
been identified.
That's my question.
Yeah, no, if you go back through section 4, for each of the 8 strategies, you'll see one or more opportunity leads identified, with the exception of one strategy where we think we've still got a ways to go to identify who that opportunity lead might be. And that's the one that you'd be most interested in, I think, the entrepreneurship strategy. And then we've identified potential collaborative partners who have generally come to the attention of Dan and Don as either people that they have identified or have self-identified to the consultant team, people who have a definite interest in each of these. So that's really what's in section 4. And the milestones, the action plan, if you will, on how you might approach implementing each of these strategies is all laid out in there. So I think we've got a framework from which to start.
Let's use an example. 4.4, the one that you're talking about. If you go into 4.4 in the book, you're going to see that it says opportunity lead to be determined. And there's a very good reason why it says opportunity lead to be determined, because as we've been about this work, and most recently with Idea Mill, we've run into a whole group of entrepreneurs, Ben Einstein being one of them, who are not part of the traditional economic development fabric. And as we came to meet those people through focus groups and informal meetings, we started realizing that somehow we have to start building bridges between what we traditionally think of as the folks who are involved in entrepreneurship, business planning, capital formation, and these entrepreneurs who aren't as obvious to us. And so to Diane's point, at Idea Mill last week, we met scores of people from the Valley who are deeply involved in entrepreneurship but aren't connected to these kinds of conversations. So we actually purposely said to be determined, because we didn't want to short circuit the possibility of building that communication, that bridge right away. So I think that's a really good example of where we had to admit to ourselves, and with Dan and Don, we had to admit, even though we thought we had tilled the ground pretty well in the work to create this, we came upon some new folks who are making quite a difference in terms of entrepreneurship in the Valley.
So does that answer your question, Diane? I'm not sure. Huh?
Actually, I want to see the completed list around the strategies of who's working on each strategy. I'm not saying right now, but eventually
Okay.
we'll see that. Names, not organizations' names,
Okay.
of people, individuals.
Okay. So can I try again? Are we ready to adopt this report, or would you like to come back and meet next month?
What are you going to do? Sit meeting for the 21st?
In the freezing cold.
I'll move adoption of the report as
Second.
presented.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you all. I think that's sort of a milestone in terms of making the switch over from planning to doing. So we do have another agenda item. I'll let Kathy take us into that.
So we've been talking at the last couple of meetings, or actually the whole time that we've been meeting, about how does this wonderful opportunity, $168 million investment in downtown Holyoke, how do we leverage that opportunity to create the type of jobs that we need in the city of Holyoke? What are those jobs? What types of skills are needed for those jobs? How do we get people the training they need? We need a workforce that is ready, and we need a seamless transition both from school to career, school to college to career. And so there's a number of initiatives throughout the city I know of that are going on before this strategy and will continue, and new things that are happening after the strategy. And I'm going to ask Kip, Bill, and Larry Bay to pipe in on this also. So as we look at, I wanted to tell you a few things that were going on. We've been meeting monthly with manufacturers. The mayor has a monthly meeting. It's called the Mayor's Industrial Development Advisory Committee. And we've been having this conversation with them, and what are the needs of the manufacturers and how can we help get them employees. Last month we met, and I posed the question to them, how many of you have trouble training people, and are you letting people go because they're not trainable? And no one could raise their hand. The majority, they all said, and Helene, you were here, they all said that it was more work ethic that was an issue. And so, and I know that David Gadare and Larry Bay, they understand this very well and are addressing those issues and the things that they do. But how do we connect, make those connections? Another example is the MIDAC group has met with our superintendent and the new person that's running the Dean Vocational School. And there's conversations happening with the chamber and others to bring the manufacturers together with education folks in a roundtable discussion. It's going to happen on October 28th. And how do we get kids from the Dean Vocational that may not be interested in going into higher ed? How do we get them into work-study programs, summer internships, job shadowing we talked about? And so that group is meeting, and we talked about having a job fair and a display of all the manufacturers in Dean Vocational so kids can actually go and see what the jobs are in the community, and then also have it become a job fair. So there's a lot of ideas that have been coming out of that. And then there's the partnership that Bill Messner has started with STCC. And I don't know, could you mention that real quick, Bill, about the collaborative with STCC, because this addresses this question as well.